So then let's just go ahead and begin. So I'm Paul Devine for those of you guys who are joining us. If you haven't heard the first two talks, you may want to catch up on that to bring you up to speed about what we're even doing. And during, I was prepping for these talks, I was caught with this struggle of me being a white person talking about racism to a predominantly white community, and realizing that I'm giving some advice and that I probably seriously need to follow that advice. And so the last session that I ended with was that we need to challenge ourselves to learn, read, and listen to people who are of a minority culture, and that we need to begin talking to them. And I think I challenged everybody to talk to a person of color. And so here I am. So I'm here with Paul Albert. Paul Albert we're titling this session Two Pauls, Two Colors, by the way. We're both bearded men, but physically that's kind of where it ends. I'm white, he's black, and he is a friend of mine, and from way back when. And since this is confession time, I feel like I should start with a very serious confession, which is that when we came up with the idea of, hey, let's actually invite somebody to have a conversation with me of color, I embarrassingly have to admit that my diversity in my friends group has decreased dramatically in the last, I would say, 5 to 7 years. And when it came to thinking of somebody that I was friends with who, or somebody who I even knew who was a different color than me, I could come up with 3 people that I felt comfortable reaching out to and saying, would you want to do this with me? And that's pretty crazy, I think. And I kind of want to throw this question out to you, Paul. Like, how do you feel about that as a black person, hearing that from a white person? How does that actually make you feel?
I think right off the cuff, it's not the norm for me, right? Because I think growing up, I've always had white friends, and white kids in my school, white neighbors, and all that. But I think hearing it doesn't surprise me. And I also don't know if that's okay that it doesn't surprise me, right? Because I think it's a good thing for us to have all different types of friends. But I also think it's important that we're not awkward and like, hey, I'm just gonna be friends with this person because they're black or Hispanic or Asian or whatever it is. So it is good to ensure that we're inserting ourselves, or even you and I as fathers, inserting our kids in situations where they will meet different people with different backgrounds, with different colors and shades and all that. It's definitely something we should work on, but at the same time, something that we shouldn't be awkward about as well.
Yeah. And I probably should follow up with my challenge of the last session of saying what I was intending was not for you just to go up to a black person and just start talking about that race, because I think that one of the key things that you have to have between when you're starting to talk about this stuff is a level of trust. And if you haven't built that level of trust up, I don't know. I'm assuming it won't come across very well.
Okay.
Paul, what is like your ethnic background exactly?
My parents are from Haiti. They immigrated from Haiti over 44 or 5 years ago now. So I'm Haitian American. And I was raised in a very Haitian household, right? Even growing up, going to church and going to mass, it was a Haitian parish. Mass was said in Haitian Creole and or French. Had lots of Haitian friends, Haitian youth group, all that. But then, of course, I had my American friends and friends with many different other backgrounds and in school and stuff. But my prayer life, my worship life, all that was Haitian. And in the household, we spoke Creole, mostly ate Haitian food and things of that nature.
That's awesome. When it comes to like the racism in America, can I just like throw out the question, have you experienced personally, I mean, racism coming in your community from white people? Like, have you experienced, as a white person, I just flat out do not know how to talk about race. I don't know. I'm afraid, I'm nervous that I'm going to offend people and that I'm just because I am not the one being discriminated against, and I don't want to discriminate somebody. So I apologize for like me stumbling over words, but have you experienced any racism from white people?
Yeah, man, I have. And really, I think even as I talk to Black friends and Hispanic friends, I'm beginning to realize that I don't have one friend who's a person of color who hasn't. Um, and I've experienced it from a very young age. But really, some of the ones that have like shocked me the most, I remember being in a car up in Boston, going to the mall with my brother-in-law who's white, and somebody cut him off in traffic, and they were at the red light. It was the whole road rage thing. It was crazy. But the lady is mad at my brother-in-law, who's the one driving, and looks into the car and looks at me, and literally says to me, "What are you looking at, monkey?" Um, and I was just like, "Oh, lady, I wasn't even the one driving. I didn't even say a word to you. I was just looking. In fact, I was kind of worried that you guys were going to crash into each other. Like it was just." So yeah, I've had some of that, and
Wow.
many other things. Like I've been followed around in stores, and yeah. But I also want to comment on one thing, Paul. Like you said, right? You said you're uncomfortable, and this is an uncomfortable topic. You're probably more comfortable than I am, but it's not the most comfortable thing to talk about. It is an uncomfortable topic, but like I also want to affirm you in that though, because you're not afraid to enter into the uncomfortable and to have these conversations, right? Because that's the only way this is going to end. And we're gonna put a stop to this racism is if we're willing to talk about it. And really, that's the cry of the Black church right now. Of like, hey, we know this is uncomfortable, we know this is awkward, but we need the church to speak up. I personally need that. I need to know that the church is with me, standing with me, and I need the church to speak up.
Yeah, uh, that story strikes me, and I think the part of it that strikes me the most is the fact that you were worried and felt the need to like apologize, or we're not even. I mean, did you feel angry when she called you that, or did you feel like did you kind of pass over it because it's like maybe you're so used to it type of thing?
I felt several things. I felt shocked because like I had nothing to do with this. I was a passenger in the vehicle. And in fact, I was telling my brother-in-law, like, man, calm down, chill out, relax. It's not that serious. And I felt anger.
Okay.
I felt offended. I think I felt all the emotions. And I also felt hurt. But at the same time, right, I think 20 minutes later, I brushed it off. And I was like, this is the world I live in. I'm treated different because of the color of my skin. And that's not okay either. But I was a lot younger then. And that was my reaction.
Yeah. Man, I apologize for that because I just yesterday actually I pulled into a driveway and it looked as if I was about to like go towards the car that was coming towards me, and this lady got angry at me and she yelled at me, but there was no name calling. Like there was just anger of, "What are you doing, man? Like why are you like pulling into my lane?" All this kind of stuff. I can't imagine like if then they start tossing out names and labels at me, how that would actually make me feel.
Yeah, man,
Um,
right? And it's exactly, and it's dehumanizing, right? Um, it's one thing to like call someone by their color of their skin, which is not okay either, um, to do that with anger. But it's another thing to call a human being a monkey. Like, right, you just brought me from a level of humanity to an animal. It's so dehumanizing, and it's frustrating as well.
yeah. Uh, do you feel like the church is taking a good stance on this? We were talking in our phone call earlier about, and you brought that up of just the topic of church, and I didn't know if like you had wanted to expound upon that and wanted to even touch on that. Do you feel as if the touch is tackling this well, whether in regards to possibly um, the people at the top, but also even just the communities at the bottom?
Yeah. This is what it is, right? There's been a lot of talk of like, hey, the church needs to take a stance on this. The church needs to say something. Even different ministries within the church and movements within the church, right? Everyone's like, hey, we say something, and I agree. Well, what I do struggle with though is, I think we live in a world right now, especially people probably a little bit younger than you and I, Paul. of where, right?
We're getting old.
If it's not on social media, then you must not be saying something, right? Like social media is where a lot of people get their news, where they get their information, it's where they learn. And the reality is, and I guess this is for the younger church too, that is not the only way to communicate. So yes, the church does need to say something, but that something does not have to be on Instagram, does not have to be on Twitter, does not have to be on Facebook. If your parish naturally uses those means, like we're doing right now, if your parish naturally uses those means to communicate to their parishioners and to the people of God, then yes, if that's a platform that you naturally use, then please keep using it. And if it's a platform that you naturally use to address other issues, then I would ask you the question, why aren't you using it? If you're not, why aren't you using it to address the race issue? However, I think the most common place that the church like takes a stance on something and speaks up against something is right in church, right from the pulpit, right from the ambo, right at mass during times of the homily. So I do have an expectation on every parish and on every priest and I would hope that they would address this at least to their parishioners from the pulpit, from the ambo, and address and denounce the sin of racism, right? That's the same way racism is a sin. Because right, racism says because of the color of your skin, you are not on the same level as me. Because of the color of your skin, I'm going to dehumanize you. I'm going to treat you differently, and I'm not going to give you the dignity that you naturally have at the very fact that you were created in the image and likeness of God, as we read in Genesis. So anything that strips away my dignity is a sin. And from the ambo and from the pulpit is where we stand, is where our leaders stand in the church to denounce sin. So I expect that a priest, a deacon, our bishops, from there would at least denounce sins, right? And I think depending what your role is in the church, I think there are different places and levels and platforms that you use to do that. Our pastors, our priests, is probably from the ambo, maybe a letter to parishioners. Our bishops, it's definitely letters, because that's how they communicate often in that way anyways. And those sitting in the pews, you need to be having these conversations, right? The same way you and I are talking right now, Paul. Parishioners need to be having this conversation amongst themselves, and they need to be having this conversation within their families. They need to be having these conversations with their priests and their pastors as well. So yeah, I don't know if that answers the question.
Yeah, okay, but here's my challenge is that my wife brought this up, is 50 years ago, the bishops released like this really powerful letter that I read through a little bit, and it was called, I think, Brothers and Sisters to Us, and it was basically about racism, discrimination, some of the trials and tribulations that were happening, I think in the 70s. I don't remember the exact year that it came out, but she had was talking to me, my wife was talking to me about the fear that in 50 years, so 50 years ago, the bishops released this letter. And the letter really could have been written today. I mean, it honestly, if I didn't know better, I would have assumed that the bishops were talking about what we are experiencing today. That's 50 years, half a century ago. And my wife was talking to me about her concern that our kids 50 years from now are going to have this same, I mean, basically potentially be in the exact same situation. And I guess my question for you is, let's say we have 50 years to work towards this. Like, what practically can we do besides just writing a letter, putting it out on social media for a couple months and then moving on from it? Because if viewers, if you were listening to the first session, that was one of my first confessions, which was essentially that after a couple of weeks of it being in the headlines, I started to struggle with wanting to move on to something else, like my consumerism, my need to consume media and news, and the next story wanted me to like move on from it. And I realized that was wrong, but how do we fight that? Like, how do we actually make sure that our culture is our society is in a better situation 50 years from now? Like, yeah. Is there real change that we can make besides just talking about it?
There is, and we've come a long way. to be honest, right? There was a time black men weren't allowed to be in the seminary, right? We've come a long way. We still have a lot more work to do. And I think it's sad, Paul. I just want to comment on that letter you talked about. So in the 40s, the Vatican asked the American bishops to formally denounce the sin of racism. It didn't happen until about 2 decades later, which that letter that you read was a response to that, right? So why did it take us almost 20 years to get to that point? Second point is, right, that was written in the 60s or 70s. I can't remember exactly the date, but right, a couple of years ago, another letter was recently written addressing the same issue. And this one got into blacks and Hispanics and indigenous people, and it just got into it got more into the heart of racism and how it and immigration and all that stuff. But again, I have my opinions on that letter. They could have done a little bit a better job. But it's sad that, right, we decades ago in the 40s the Vatican asked that of us. It took us forever to respond. We did respond finally, and then we find ourselves decades later rewriting the same thing again. So yes, it's important to write the letters, but there are several things that we can do. First and foremost, I don't know about your parish. My parish, I walk into it. It's a white corpus on the cross. It's white European-looking statues with blue eyes. It's white saints. And my current parish, my pastor's Hispanic, but my whole life, for the most part, a big chunk of my life, except for when I was in Boston at that Haitian parish, my priest did not look like me, right? So as a child and even as a teenager, I walked into a parish and I looked at statues and I looked at images, and immediately I said to myself, sainthood is not attainable. It's not possible for me. That is a thing that only a white European can attain. It's not something I could do because none of these saints look like me, right? Immediately it communicated that. I was just reading an article of a priest in Boston who died, a black priest. And sadly like that, and this is the case in many dioceses, but that black priest passed away. And in this article, they talked about how he was the last black priest to be ordained in that diocese in like over 30 years, right? So there needs to be an intentionality of the church right now to not only speak out, but there needs to be an intentionality to reach out, right? We exist to evangelize. That's our mission. And we're at a point right now where we almost need to overcompensate. The black community, the black church, as speaking to Catholics, has been failed in many ways, or we feel like the church has failed us. So there needs to be an intentionality of how we reach out to the black church, right? Overall, the mission is, hey, let's form missionary disciples. Overall, that's the mission. And really, we shouldn't break it down to, all right, how do we form white missionary disciples? How do we form black missionary disciples? And let's have an office specifically for black people and Hispanics, and then everyone else will fall into everyone else office. But unfortunately, because where we find ourselves right now, there needs to be an intentionality in saying, okay, yes, I am going to focus on the black community intentionally. I'm going to put funds towards that. I'm going to put ministries towards that. I'm going to try to hire people in my parishes on a diocesan level that look like them, and not only look like them, but that understands them, that could speak into their reality. Right? Because something for me, Paul, it may be something I need to pray on and work on a little bit more. But when I go to a huge event, a huge conference, which both you and I have been to, and a black man gets up on the stage and starts preaching the gospel, immediately the level of trust is already there, right? Because it's my reality that I'm like, okay, you understand me. You've experienced the same things I've experienced. We've grown up in similar neighborhoods. We've lived through similar situations. So immediately when that man is preaching or woman is preaching the gospel, right, it immediately becomes incarnate. It immediately takes on flesh in my own personal life. And not to say that I can't be preached to and the gospel can't be given to me by white men. It can, and it has. You were one of them when we lived in community together, right? And then our director of missions at that time too was one of them. It can be done, and it can be done very well, and it has been done. My conversion is thankfully to many white men and women who have invested into me. But it sounds different. I receive it differently coming from a someone who looks like me and has had the same experiences as me. And I think, and that's the reality of many people of color within the church. It's like, we're not saying, hey, only have Black people on stages, but it's like, how, can you invite someone to speak into my reality? And that someone should look like me and have the same experiences that I have had as well.
Dang. You were saying something. I got caught up in your story, so I might fumble over the words and forget it. But it led me to something I had read online, which was a line that reads, "To be an ally of an oppressive community," which I feel like the Black community is an oppressive. The minority community in America is an oppressed community. To be an ally of an oppressed community, to be an ally of them, is to transfer the benefits of your privilege to those who lack it. And I think that, you use the word, we need to overcompensate because of the lack of compensation that has happened beforehand. I think that before now, and you can tell me what you feel about this, because it probably hurts, is that before now, I probably would have used the excuse, well, that happened, slavery happened 150 years ago. It doesn't have anything to do with me. I'm like a nice guy. Like, I know a Black person. And I say that in the session 2 of, like, those are 2 excuses that you might have used. Those are 2 excuses that I personally have used. And I think that talking with you now and reading the articles I've been reading and following the news that I've been following, is that I realize that there was never sort of an equality given to African Americans or people of minority when they were free. Like, it was as if we said, here, we're going to take these chains off of you, but we are going to keep like mental and we're going to manipulate and keep you down and not actually bring you to the level. And I think the reason is because, and I hope people can agree with this, is because, like, we have a privilege that we're unwilling to get rid of. Like, we have a comfort level that we're not willing to let go of and allow other people to have that comfort level too. Like, we want to have our comfort level and we want people to be brought up to our comfort level, but that can't actually exist. Like, we can't keep what we have and give everything to another group too. We actually have to give up some of the things that we have so that other people have some. And I'm starting to realize that, I need to be okay sometimes with overcompensating, probably all the time, with overcompensating, because that's the only way that we can help a group of minority actually raise to the level of equality. Yeah, sorry, go.
Yeah, man, I agree 100%. And again, just going back to the church, right? The church knows this, and the church believes this as well, and the church has shown this. I think the story of St. Catherine, a priest, a friend of mine, brought this to my attention not too long ago, right? One of the things that St. Catherine did is she realized the privileges that she had as a white woman, right? As a white woman, she was allowed to buy land, invest into businesses, and things like that. And at that period in time, black men and women didn't have that privilege. They weren't allowed to do that. So St. Catherine would literally, like, a family would save up to start a business, or she would even help them start a business, and she would open a business on her name, right? And she would buy a piece of property, start a business, and on paper that business was hers, but really that business belonged to a black person, to a black family, a person of color. She realized the privilege that she had as a white woman, how because she was white, there were certain things that she could do in society that people who weren't white could not do, and she used that for the benefit of her community, of the Black community specifically. And I think this could get real complicated and political, because right now there's these talks about reparation. I want land, I want money, I want this, and that, and it's making people real uncomfortable. And it's something that I haven't really figured out yet, fully figured out. But right, I can't imagine coming to you, Paul, and being like, man, that house that you bought, if I remember correctly, that you also put a lot of work into physically, like just doing construction stuff. For me to just show up and be like, hey, bro, your family enslaved my family a couple hundred years ago. I'm gonna need your house. Give that to me. Right? When I think of it like that, that sounds kind of crazy. But one thing that I do know that happened in history, right, is when slaves were free, when slavery was outlawed in America, Texas, right? This is the whole Juneteenth thing that we just celebrated. Texas kept slavery a thing in place for 2 more years. For 2 more years. And supposedly there was a messenger that was sent to go tell Texas, hey, slavery's over, it's abolished. And that messenger either got killed on the way or never made it, is what they say. And it wasn't until soldiers came down and told the slaves, why you guys still enslaved? This is not a thing. And there's one man who was a slave owner who, after it became known and made public in Texas that slavery is no longer a thing, 2 years after the fact, that when he released his slaves, the federal government gave him money as reparation. I was like, yeah, you're losing a lot of money right now. So here, we're going to give you this to kind of make up for it. So reparation has been done, right? In that case. But now when we're talking about it in this case, it makes people extremely uncomfortable. And I'm not saying that I think every white person should give me their houses and give me their property and give me their land. I'm not saying that at all. To me, that sounds kind of crazy because I know how hard my white friends have worked. What I am saying is that that we acknowledge, number one, some of the huge injustices that have taken place in our country, and even in the form of reparation in terms of that white slave owner. And it start thinking about, okay, like, all right, how do we reach out? How do we minister to this particular group of people? I don't have the perfect answer. I know where the place to start is dignity. And you said that right. You said that perfectly, of like, right. We broke the chains, but we never elevated the Black community to the level that they should be. We know theologically, like in prayer, through the teachings of the church, Paul, like we know that you and I are equal. Like that's a reality that the Lord has. You were created in His image, I was created in His image, though we are completely two different colors. So we know that we have that dignity, and that the Lord loves us both the same. How He expresses that love is different, but He loves us equally. But unfortunately we have systems, some which exist even in our church, that don't represent that too well. Like there are some Catholic schools, I won't say diocese, I already said too many dioceses and stuff. But anyways, there are some Catholic schools in our country, right, who have policies of, hey, our dress code says that you can't have braids in your hair. And if anyone who has Black kids, or I have mixed kids, my wife is white, like, getting up, a Black girl, it is not conducive for her to wake up every single day and brush her hair and put it in the perfect ponytail and put it into the perfect bun. In fact, if she does that too much, the very brushing of her hair over and over and pulling it back in a perfect tight ponytail, eventually she will actually start to go bald at the front of her hair. It is actually not good for a Black woman's hair to consistently do that each and every single day. So braids, at least it allows the hair of a Black woman to, they say, to take a break. You braid it, okay, I don't have to do anything with this for at least a week or for the next couple of days, and it's gonna stay. I could put treatment in it, and it would actually be, it's good for the growth of my hair. So to put something like that in your dress code policy in a Catholic school, and again, I don't think they're doing it intentionally. I think they just have no idea. It's crazy. You're basically telling a Black girl, number one, we're going to make your life harder. You're going to have to get up an hour earlier than you normally would, because it does take that long to do Black hair. You have to get up an hour earlier. You're going to come to school more tired because of that. If you're tired, you're not going to learn as well. And there's just this ripple effect of one tiny little policy. So, right, again, we need to reach out more. Let's intentionally reach out to Black men and recruit them for seminaries. Let's intentionally reach out to Black women and recruit them for religious life. Let's hire Black teachers. Let's have more Black deacons and priests, and more Black people in lay ministries, and just people of color in general. Like, there needs to be an intentionality of that. And I'm not saying hire someone just because they're Black, but we just need to be more intentional.
Yeah.
Sorry, I talked the whole.
No, I didn't know about that. I didn't know about that. And that's in session 2, I talk about just like our ignorance holds us back from really kind of knowing about situations. I recently learned about the whole Texas thing as well. And I feel as if my eyes are being opened in a lot of new ways. Um, I think that something I wanted to say too is, and you can agree and disagree. This is fine. If this is okay to disagree, is that the government should and can, probably can, and hopefully will continue to advocate, continue to be intentional, continue to help repair like the damage that they have caused. But I also think that that's not where the real fight is. The real fight is really in an individual's heart and in a community's heart, like separate communities across the country. Like, I think that that's where we honestly, like me, besides voting, there's not much more I can do when it comes to government, except I guess to enter into government. Maybe I'll run for mayor someday, but but vote for me. But I feel like the things that I can do are, instead of just trying to change the government, but trying to change the people around me, trying to change their hearts, and really advocate in the community that I currently live in, which is what I'm trying to do. And I feel like that's sometimes is even harder because you're changing a mindset. And I believe that there are a lot of people out there who I can't change the mind, but I shouldn't feel that way. And I hesitate then to talk about this kind of stuff with people who disagree with me, because like I almost like write them off. And I think that our church needs more courage and it needs more perseverance. Like white people need to be more courageous about talking about it with people. There's been often times that I have been in a community, in a conversation, in a group of friends, and the topic, I went to a fairly diverse school. I think it was 25% minority. And when I say fairly, I mean that's probably more diverse than many other schools. So I'm not touting it, but I even remember having a couple of African American friends in groups, and having it be a joke of one specific guy being like, being the whitest black kid that we knew. And I look back on that and I think, what was I thinking? Like, what was I thinking? Hanging out with people like that, not saying something, maybe not even just saying something, but not even realizing how that was probably coming across to this kid. His name is Teddy. And he was a great kid. And the joke was that he was the whitest black kid that are in the school. And I look back and I'm ashamed and feel as if that's like, I need to overcompensate for the times in which I have let racism slide in my life.
Yeah, definitely, Paul. And I agree with you 100%, right? I've had experiences like that Teddy has had too, and even currently in my adult life, as a child and as a teen as well. But even in my adult life, right, my wife Anna is white, and I've been told by other black men and women, and even by white men and women, that I can't. Man, you're black, but you're not really black. You married a white woman. I'm just like, okay, you guys are crazy. But anyways, but I want to go back to the point of like, what can we do? Government has its role, and this is the reality, right? Racism is a sin, and we know since the beginning of time, right? We read in Revelations a war that broke out in heaven between the dragon and the woman who was going to give birth to the son, and we know that's Mary and Jesus and all that, right? So there's been a war against sin since the very beginning. It started in the garden, and so and racism is one of those sins, and we are at war. We are at war in a spiritual sense, and we know war, right? War, when it happens, there's several different battlefields. It doesn't just happen in one place, right? It's when we're at war, this state is fighting against this area over here. There's a war breaking out on this mountain or on this hill or down in this valley. Like, there's several different battlefields. So one thing we need to discern is, all right, Lord, which battlefield within this war against racism, what battlefield are you calling? What battlefield are you calling me to? So yes, right. You're a man of God. If you're part of another denomination, they'll probably say you're a man of the cloth, right? You're a minister. But like you're in ministry, you're a man of God. So primarily, your battlefield and mine right now, it's within the church. That's the platform we have. These are the people we interact with. And quite frankly, for me, that's the group of people I care about the most, right? I love everyone, but I really care and love the church and want nothing good for the church. And I just want the church to be faithful to her mission. So that's my platform. However, even when it comes to politics too, like I do have a platform there, kind of, right? Yes, I could vote. But I could also be writing letters to my political leaders. I could be doing phone calls, right? There are policies that are put in place that I could. Right here in Georgia, there's a fight going on right now. Hate crimes aren't a thing in Georgia. Like, you can't get charged with a hate crime. So right, that's something I could be calling my leaders and be like, hey, this is not okay. Like this needs to become a thing, right? Because we had that son and father that chased that black man and killed him right here in Georgia, right? And if hate crimes was a thing, that would have been one of the charges that came up against him, but it's not. So it's not one of the charges. So yeah, so politically we do have some things we could do. People we could call, letters we could write, emails we could send. But you also need to know, all right, Lord, what's my battlefield? For you and I, again, as men of God, as fathers, as husbands, first and foremost, it begins within our first battlefield is our home, right? We just have this call to protect our home and to form and educate our children. So it starts there. So it's like, hey, what are you saying to your kids? How are you bringing your kids into this, and teaching them the right way to respond to this, but also our platform on our church and within different ministries that we're involved in. What are we doing in those places as well?
Awesome. I think that gives us like a very clear ending, because every single session we want to like challenge people. And I think that is a perfect question, because it's a question I need to reflect on as well. It's like, what is my battlefield? And so I think we're going to call it quits for today. And it was like a great conversation with you. I missed you a lot. This makes me miss you more. Makes me want to just sit around and talk about our families and stuff all the time. But I feel the question like I want to throw out to our viewers is, and to challenge you to really think and pray about and to then act on, is what is the battlefield that the Holy Spirit is calling you to in this fight against racism? Like, is it politics? Is it the church? Is it a local community? Is it to start like serving downtown where we live, downtown Toledo? Is like find a place? Because I think that sometimes we struggle with feeling like, what can I do? I'm just one person. And I think that maybe it's even just simply talking to your parents who might be racist, talking to a friend who might be racist, and starting to challenge them on their thoughts. And that might mean that you give up a friendship because they are unwilling to be friends with you with that viewpoint. But I think that is some of the uncomfortableness that us as white people need to be willing to do. We need to be willing to give up things so that other people can have more. So,
amen. And Paul, I just want to thank you. Right, I feel right now. I miss you too, brother. I miss you. I miss your wife. And yeah, I want to be with you guys right now and your kids and just share life. But I just want I want to thank you and let you know that from a black bearded man to a white bearded man, like, I love you. I feel supported by you. And you got the right mindset for this. And I think you're going in the right direction with this too. So just keep doing that. Don't stop. This is a work of evangelization. And we need to be faithful to that, continue to evangelize in that way. So thank you so much, brother.
Awesome. Thank you, Paul. We will see you and keep fighting the good fight.
All right. Thank you, brother. Love you.
Love you too.